Hello, everyone. Welcome to another episode of The Real Hosts of Short-Term Rentals. Today, there are just a few of us in the room. There's three of us, Dina from Kelowna, Canada, and Michael from Seattle. And we're going to talk, they're actually going to interview me because I took on a huge project of purchasing my first outside investment. So I'll give a little bit of a background, and I'm hoping that from this interview, those of you who are either in a similar situation or are considering purchasing a short-term rental for yourself, that you'll get some insight into this. So I have been running a short-term rental out of my home in San Francisco for 9 years. And last summer, essentially, because of San Francisco rules, you have to live in the same place or the same property that you're renting out. So it's a one bedroom, one bath home, and it has an in-law unit down below. And I would rent out the one bedroom, one bath, and I would move into the in-law each time. And what happened was last summer, the San Francisco Short-Term Rental Board discovered that the ceiling height in the in-law unit that I was staying in downstairs was not the requisite 7 feet 6 inch ceiling height, and it didn't have the requisite windows going into it, etc. So because of that, they sent me a letter to say, unless I renovate my in-law unit, even though it wasn't for guests, it was just for me, but I have to be physically living in habitable space in the house. And this was not habitable space. According to the short-term rental board, this was just storage space. So I looked into renovating it, and it was just it was going to be an absolute fortune because you have to dig down to get the requisite ceiling height. You'd had to deal with the foundation and a whole bunch of other things that was going to cost over $200,000. So instead of doing that, I decided to purchase a separate property that would just exclusively be for short-term rentals, not in San Francisco. And I looked in other areas of around me, around the Bay Area. And because of the cost, because of insurance issues in California, I just decided that California was not the right place to do this. So I did some research on the top places around the US to purchase a short-term rental. And although there were several places I was considering, I narrowed it down to uh, North Carolina, which I had never in my life been to before. In fact, I'd never even heard of Asheville. This was before the hurricane last year, which most people now have heard of it because of what happened here. Anyway, so I looked into this market. It's up in the mountains. It's in a very nice triangle with Charlotte, a 2 hour drive away, Atlanta, 3.5 hour drive away, Nashville, a 4.5 hour drive away. So a lot of people come here because of the mountains, because there's tons of outdoor activities to do, because it's a very temperate climate, etc. And I decided that I was going to purchase a short-term rental here. So the long and the short of it is that I started my process last summer, in the summer, August of 2024. It is now April 2025. I purchased the property in January, the beginning of January. It closed the beginning of February. And I am now here at the house getting everything put together and trying to finalize this to launch it hopefully by the end of May. So that gives you a little bit of a background. And I'd now like to turn it over to Dina and Michael, and you guys can grill me and ask any questions that you like, and I will be happy to share with our audience.
First question, what are you doing with your space in San Francisco now? Is it just kind of sitting there rotting away? Like, what's going on with now that you can't rent it out as a short-term rental? How are you utilizing that asset?
So I was living in it even while it was a short-term rental, and I would move between the in-law unit down below and the main level when it wasn't rented. So now I have my whole house to myself, and the in-law unit I use whenever I have guests that come to stay, friends of mine or family, and I don't rent it out because I can't.
Nothing at all, not even a long-term rental you would consider, or that's not what you wanted?
I could rent it out long term. So legally I'm allowed to do 30 days or more. I mean, apart from being here, which will turn out to be a bit, probably 2 months. And I've got some friends that are staying there this coming weekend. But apart from that, yeah, I'm not planning to rent it out. I'm just planning to live it.
I've got a couple questions for you. One would be, can you just describe the place and
Yeah.
how big it is, what it is? But secondly, the storm itself and the infrastructure and everything, what is it about that that caused you to go, I'm just going to go ahead with it? Because I mean, I would kind of get cold feet possibly. What was your,
It was a little scary when Helene hit because I mean when you looked at YouTube and the news and whatnot, it really sounded like Asheville was wiped off the map. And I think that all of us know, and those of you who are watching know, that oftentimes the news will over exaggerate things. The reality is that the whole area was hit pretty badly, but the news focused on the River Arts District, and there were a few other areas around Asheville that really got devastated. And those areas did get devastated. There's no doubt. But most of the downtown Asheville was fine, and most of the areas around Asheville were not badly affected. I mean, there were a lot of downed trees. The hurricane happened at the beginning of October 2024. I came here in the middle of November 2024 to assess if I was still interested in the market. I mean, I wanted to see what was still standing. And I realized that it was a big over exaggeration. Now, unfortunately, because of all that negative PR or all the news coverage, etc., there's no doubt that it's going to affect tourism this year, 2025. But I think that first of all, the Asheville municipality or the PR, the tourism board has a big budget that they're pushing to promote Asheville and to get people to come back here. The reality is that most of this area relies on tourism. And I'll now get into your the second part of your question. But anyway, when I came here in November, yeah, there were a lot of down trees, and when you drove along the street, there were cut up trees along the side of the roads, etc. There were some roads that were impassable. But now in April of 2025, you would hardly know. I mean, there's still some trees on the side of the road, but very little. You'd really hardly know that anything had happened here. So, and I realized that when I came here in November. The reason why Asheville is such an interesting place, first of all, in terms of short-term rentals, you cannot have a short-term rental in the downtown area of Asheville. But Asheville is not a very big city. 92,000 people live in Asheville. Well, not just the downtown area, but a lot of the outer areas are still called Asheville. So the in terms of the reason why this is such an attractive area, it's surrounded by mountains, the Blue Mountains, which are just stunningly gorgeous. You may have seen pictures of them before, but it's really, it makes the whole city just, anywhere you look, it's just really pretty. And because of all these mountains, there's great hiking, there's mountain biking, there's river rafting, there's fishing, anything you can think of with relating to mountains or water, they have here. Town of Asheville has the Biltmore Mansion, which is very famous. It's the largest private home in the United States. It was built by the Vanderbilts in the early 90s. And you can tour the Biltmore Mansion, and it has huge grounds around it with amazing flora. It really is an attraction unto itself. A lot of people come here just for that.
what about your place though? What's your,
Okay. So when I looked at purchasing a place, I think any time that you consider purchasing an Airbnb or purchasing a home to turn into an Airbnb, you want to make it unique. And in order to make it unique, you have to narrow down the competition. So there are a lot of Airbnbs around Asheville. And I was also going to tell you that it's one of the few places that right now there are no restrictions on short-term rentals, apart from the fact that you can't have a short-term rental in the downtown area. Within a 10-minute drive or even less from downtown, all the way around Asheville, you can have a short-term rental. And if you do a search for Airbnb in Asheville, it's going to have the circle in the middle where there's nothing, and then all these rentals around the outside. There are, to answer your question, Dina, there are 6,500 Airbnbs in this area.
For a population of 92,000.
Well, the population is deceptive because there are 92% to people who live here full time. But in terms of tourism, last year before Helene, there were over 15 million tourists that came to the Asheville area, because it also borders the Smoky Mountains, which is the #1 national park in the U.S. So a lot of people who are going to the Smokies will come first to Asheville, or after going to the Smokies will come to Asheville. So because of that, there's a huge number of people that come here. But if you take that 6,500 and you narrow it down by room number, obviously, and this goes for anywhere, the larger the home, the more rooms and the more people you can accommodate, the fewer competitors that you have. So if you're looking at a 2-bedroom, there's going to be hundreds and maybe even thousands of competitors to you. If you're looking at a 3-bedroom, that narrows it down. If you're looking at a 4-bedroom, that again narrows it down. I ended up purchasing a 6-bedroom home. So it's 6 bedrooms, 4 bathrooms, 3,200 square feet, and it's on 1.2 acres of property, which is great because you don't see any of the neighbors from the property. But that was one of the considerations, was getting something that would be more unique. And then in terms of the current renovation and adding in amenities, it's very competitive in terms of amenities. So anytime that you're purchasing something, you need to look at your competitors and you need to see what amenities they offer so that you can at least meet the same criteria. The house, when I purchased it, had a hot tub, but I'm putting in an outside dry sauna. I'm putting in a 2-lane bowling. I'm putting in a fire pit, an outside fire pit area, a games room, a movie theater. Because a lot of the competitors in this market, and if you want to be able to charge $750 to $1,000 or more a night, you have to have these things because that's what your competitors do.
So you went from a 1-bedroom, 1-bath to 6 bedrooms, 4 baths?
That is correct.
Okay.
Yeah, it's a big jump. I mean, I'm not living in the house. I'm planning to rent it out.
No, I know, but
yeah,
it's an interesting marketing challenge.
Well,
I mean,
it is. I mean, the reality is that I could never in my life afford a 6-bedroom, 4-bath in San Francisco because they would be in the 5 million or more. While here, the cost is a lot less. So that's really the reason to do it.
So when I look at a market, so tell me why you're confident moving into this market. When I look at the stats and I see anything over 1% of the housing units being used for short-term rentals, just from my experience, because my market was annihilated with regulations. When I see anything over 1%, I get nervous. Looking at the stats here, it looks like there's like 5% of the housing units in the county or short-term rentals, with the concentration being in Asheville, and seeing what's going on globally. How are you protecting yourself or insulating yourself from potential, like what happens if next year they come down? We got 6 months notice. What's your plan should that happen? Doomsday prepping.
Yeah. Well, I very, very highly doubt that would happen here, but if it does, then I would just turn it into a monthly rental and rent 30 days or more.
Did
And
you
it would-
run the numbers based on that then? Okay, so that's how you protected yourself, as
it would
plan
cover
B.
cost would
Okay,
be planned.
perfect.
And the
Smart.
other thing about it is that after I do all the renovations and add everything in, a nice thing is that I can get it reassessed and we'll probably be able to take money out of it. So that'll be a really nice, to be able to cover some of the costs that have already been sunk.
And you know, that's a really good point I'd like to point out to everybody listening is anytime you're forecasting for the investment property, I always say look at the long-term rental rate. That's your base. What can you get and the occupancy for that? Don't invest based on what you think is short-term rental revenue, because if something changes, like what's happened in my market, you need to know that you're going to be okay versus over leveraging, which is what I've seen a lot of investors in my market do. And now they are literally drowning every month, taking on all that expense because they were banking on short-term rental income, not long-term. So that's super smart that you did that.
It is good. But at the same time, going back to your question about what's happening globally and the economy and whatnot, I don't know when the viewers are watching this right now, but we're in April of 2025, and we're looking at a potential recession, or possibly even a depression. So I do worry about that. I feel like maybe the fact that this is close to a drivable market with several of these large cities will be a good thing. Because in my mind, okay, if you don't have enough money to fly to Paris and do a European trip, let's do a drive up to Asheville and we'll have a fun girls' getaway or a family trip or multi-family trip, etc.
Yes. Agreed. You've got three source markets to pull from in driving distance, which is really healthy.
Yeah, yeah.
When are you planning to go live, and what do you need to do between now and then?
A lot. I'm really targeting to go live by June 1st, which there's a lot that needs to happen but in order to do that. And part of that is obviously to do a listing, you need photography. So everything needs to be done. The contractors are still working right now on electrical stuff, on building shelving, on it still has to be painted. The floors still need to be done. So there's a lot of stuff that still needs to be done. And then outside, I need to have a landscaper flatten the front area so that the fire pit can go in, so that the contractor can build the outdoor bowling, etc. Yeah, I mean, I'm here at the property 7 days a week, every day, working on things, ordering things, talking with subcontractors, etc. I feel like I'm a general contractor, and I've never done this job before. So, yeah, there's still quite a bit to do, but each week I am seeing some good progress. So, and then, there's a lot of things. Anyone who has bought a house before, there's always the unknowns. So, for example, I brought in an HVAC person yesterday for heating and air conditioning. Now, the house has heating and air conditioning. There's two different zones right now. It's a three level house. So there's a thermostat on the top level and there's a thermostat on the middle level. There's no thermostat for the basement level. And what happens is in the daytime it's lovely. It's nice and cool down there when it's hot outside. But at night it's cold down in the basement level. So I was thinking about putting in splits so that there would be another thermostat down there. And the HVAC person said to me, because all the tubing and the I forget what those things are called, but everything related to the heating and air conditioning would need to be redone. I'd be looking at 25, 30,000 to do that. But in the meantime, he opened up the furnace and there's mold in the furnace. There was a dead rat in the furnace. So these are costs that you don't initially think about when you purchase a new place. So yeah, it's a lot of stuff.
How much?
Well,
How much is everything?
I don't yet know. I will tell you that I hired an interior designer, and that was a whole process because I mean, interior designers are freaking expensive. I looked at two local designers that were recommended by my realtor, and they were both exorbitant. So I ended up going with an online designer, which for those of you who aren't familiar with this, and this is apparently very, very common, is you'll first do a Matterport, which is a virtual video walkthrough of the property. So you have this link to a video walkthrough, which anyone that you provide the link to, they can look at each one of the rooms. It'll give the measurements. It'll give everything. And then this design house only deals with short-term rentals. So, so we went through and did work with this company to decorate each one of the rooms. They put together a list of links for purchasing all the furniture and everything. I mean, that's just one component of putting together a home, because you have to have it furnished and curtains up or blinds and other things. And depending on how comfortable you are taking on things like that, some people are really talented and can take a look at suggestions and say, ooh, I like that, but I don't particularly like that. And other people are like, I need to let the designer do everything. So based on that, when you interview designers, you need to really make it clear about what aspects they need to take on.
I would ask you how you would go about it differently, but you're not through the process yet. So maybe that's a premature question.
We'll do a follow-up episode on like,
Yeah. But your thought was, what was the question that you were thinking of asking?
Well, just what lessons have you learned? But, so far, even like how you would, if you were to start over,
Right.
how would you do it? What would you do differently? But again, you haven't really learned all whatever lessons yet.
Yeah. I mean, you have to, number one, everything in life is negotiable. So when you get quotes from different vendors, you can negotiate with them. If they give you a quote for 10 grand, you can say to them, well, listen, because of budget constraints, I can only do 8,500, and maybe you settle at 9,000, but you then saved $1,000. So number one, I would say don't ever take a quote at face value. I mean, some of them you have to, that's what it is. It is what it is. But other ones, they will negotiate with you. And, the old adage, things take longer and cost way more than what you have budgeted for. So you need to really, anytime you take on a project like this, make sure that your budget is way more than you think it's going to be, because it will be.
so what
Like
about,
double?
yeah, yeah. What are we talking so far?
In terms of what I've put in so far, I would probably say about 60 or so for the contractors, but that's not including, that's just the labor, not including materials. So maybe with materials, somewhere between 80 and 100. And then all the design stuff, furniture, etc. We had an episode a little while ago about Minoan. Highly recommend Minoan. Get yourself an account with them. It's free to join them as long as you can prove that you're purchasing for a rental that you're not living in. And they saved me, probably, it wouldn't be an overestimate to say that I've saved over 25,000 working with Minoan. So, I mean, it's a big house, so I have to purchase quite a bit. But even if you have a small place, you're going to save quite a bit of money. The other thing that I need to do once everything is finished, I need to get it photographed. I need to find a cleaning crew. I need to find, if I'm going to do inspectors, find those. And then, you have to have your go-to electrician, your go-to plumber, anything that I'm going to be managing this remotely from San Francisco. So anything that could come up, you need to have a solution for. The Ring doorbell technology is just amazing, because anywhere you are in the whole world, you can see who's coming to your door. If you get one of the Wi-Fi locks, you can open the door for them or set a code, which is also critical. Anything that you can do. I added a device to the hot tub where I can turn on the hot tub remotely. I can change the temperature, I can turn on the lights, etc. And I'm getting Lutron lights for the house, Lutron Cassetta, which works with a separate hub device, which also will allow me to turn on and off lights remotely.
So this was my question. So that's great that you're setting this up for remote management, but do you think that like anyone watching as an investor could do what you're doing in this, getting it set up remotely? Do you feel like you need to be there? And if so, how long, for how much of this process for setting up? Do you think this is a lot of time you're able to dedicate, and not a lot of people who have like a 9 to 5 job could be there? Do you think it has to be done this way? Or do you find you're saving yourself money by being your own general contractor?
I think so. I think in terms of saving money, it really behooves you to be at the property to oversee everything. But could it be done totally remotely? Yes, it is. It is possible if you have a good general contractor. It could be done remotely. But I'm very detail oriented, and I feel that being here. I'll just give you one example. I have a decking contractor, and before I was here, and before I had the Ring doorbell installed, I would call him and he'd be like, I wasn't able to go today because I had another project, but I'll be there tomorrow, etc. Now that I'm here, he's here every day because he knows that if he's not here, I will have visibility right away. So those sort of things make a big difference. And there's certain things that you don't know until you're at the property. And even if you decide to use a general contractor or to use someone, a designer that's going to set everything up for you, you have to go and stay in your own rental, and you have to stay in every one of the bedrooms and pretend you're a guest, and just think of anything that a guest might need or ask you for, so that you can set those things up ahead of time.
Do you think you would do this for another person, help set up as a property manager or as a short-term rental manager? Would you ever do this again for someone else as a paid gig?
Maybe. Now that I know the process, maybe. I don't think I would come and stay in the property as long as I'm here, but I now am pretty knowledgeable about the process and finding contractors. I am very excited and I'm very nervous at the same time because there's a lot of upfront costs to this. And, one doesn't know how quickly or how soon you're going to recoup those. But I do believe that the improvements to the property alone will increase the value substantially of the house. So I do believe that I'll be able to reassess it and get money out of it. And I I've been in this business for over 9 years now, so I'm pretty confident that I'll be able to market it well and that it'll look great once it's done.
Cool. Well, we're proud of you for stepping out
Yeah.
of your area.
Thank you. Yeah,
And we wish you the best with it for
appreciate the
sure.
questions. And I want to put this out to our audience that if you're considering something similar, or if you have other questions that haven't been answered in this episode, please feel free to message us, to DM us on the platform that you're watching this. Please like this episode, share it with friends and people who you know who are in the short-term rental world. And we are here every week to do a new episode focused on this industry. So with that, we'll end this episode. Thank you again for joining us, and we will see you on the next episode of The Real Host of Short-Term Rentals. Bye-bye for now.